Tonight, we're breaking down one of the most serious escalation signals in the current Middle East conflict: Iran's claim that it targeted the USS Abraham Lincoln, a U.S. aircraft carrier operating in the region. This is not a minor development. Anytime a U.S. nuclear-powered aircraft carrier is named as a target, the stakes move to an entirely different level. But before jumping to conclusions, we need to slow down and analyze what this actually means. What is confirmed, what is claimed, and what the strategic implications really are. Let's begin with the basics. The USS Abraham Lincoln is a Nimitz-class aircraft carrier. That means it is one of the largest and most capable warships ever built. It is not just a ship, it is a floating airbase. When deployed, it carries a carrier air wing composed of fighter aircraft, electronic warfare jets, early warning aircraft, helicopters, and logistical support platforms. It is escorted by destroyers, cruisers, and often submarines. Together, that formation is known as a carrier strike group. A carrier strike group is designed to operate in contested environments. It is built to survive missile threats, submarine threats, drone threats, and aircraft threats. So when Iran claims to have targeted the Abraham Lincoln, we have to understand the scale of what that implies. Now let's examine the Iranian claim itself. The Iranian state-linked media outlets reported that ballistic missiles were launched in the direction of the carrier in response to U.S. operations inside Iranian territory. The framing from Tehran presents this as a retaliatory action. However, as of now, there has been no verified evidence showing that the carrier was struck or damaged. In situations like this, there are usually three possibilities. First, missiles were launched but intercepted before reaching the target. Second, missiles were launched but fell short or were misdirected. Third, the claim is primarily strategic messaging, designed to project strength domestically and regionally. Without confirmed battle damage assessments or independent verification, it is irresponsible to declare a successful strike. Aircraft carriers operate with layered defensive systems, specifically designed for ballistic and cruise missile threats. Let's break down those defensive layers. The outer defensive ring typically involves airborne early warning aircraft. These aircraft extend radar coverage hundreds of miles beyond the fleet. They detect incoming threats long before they reach the ships themselves. The next layer includes Aegis-equipped cruisers and destroyers. These ships carry advanced radar systems and interceptor missiles capable of engaging ballistic and cruise missiles at significant distances. Then you have close-in defensive systems aboard the carrier and escort ships. These include missile interceptors and rapid-fire defensive weapons designed as last resort protection. In short, targeting a U.S. carrier is extremely difficult. Successfully striking one is even more difficult. That does not mean it is impossible. It means it requires advanced coordination, accurate targeting data, and the ability to overcome electronic warfare and interception layers. This brings us to a critical question. How would Iran attempt such a strike? Iran has invested heavily in anti-access and area denial capabilities. Rather than building a navy to match the United States ship-for-ship, Iran focused on asymmetric tools: ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, drones, fast attack boats, and coastal defense systems. Ballistic missiles are often discussed in this context. Iran has developed medium-range ballistic missiles capable of reaching maritime targets. However, striking a moving aircraft carrier is vastly more complex than striking a fixed land target. An aircraft carrier does not remain stationary. It changes course. It operates within a protective formation. It uses electronic warfare to disrupt targeting systems. For a ballistic missile to hit such a target, real-time tracking data would be required. That tracking data would likely need to come from satellites, drones, maritime patrol aircraft, or over-the-horizon radar systems. Each of those systems would themselves be vulnerable to disruption. So even if Iran launched missiles in the general direction of a carrier strike group, the probability of impact without advanced targeting support would be low. Now let's consider escalation dynamics. When a state publicly claims to have targeted a U.S. carrier, the message is not only military, it is political. It signals willingness to confront American power directly. But escalation in modern warfare is rarely linear. If a U.S. carrier were actually hit and sustained damage, the response would almost certainly be severe. Aircraft carriers represent both military capability and symbolic power. An attack causing casualties would dramatically expand the conflict. However, if missiles were intercepted or failed to reach their target, The United States may choose a calibrated response or no public response at all, depending on strategic calculations. Another factor to consider is deterrence signaling. Iran may be attempting to demonstrate that American naval forces are not untouchable. Even an attempted strike can serve propaganda purposes domestically. It reinforces a narrative of resistance. At the same time, the United States positioned carriers in the region precisely to deter such actions. The presence of the Abraham Lincoln itself is a signal. It communicates readiness, air power, projection capability, and rapid strike options. The carrier's air wing allows sustained operations without reliance on regional air bases. That flexibility reduces vulnerability to land-based missile attacks on fixed installations. Now, let's examine the broader military environment. The region is dense with missile systems, air defense systems, and naval assets. The Persian Gulf and surrounding waters are relatively confined compared to open oceans. That geography increases risk because reaction times are shorter. If Iran did attempt to target a carrier, it likely would have used a combination of missile launches and potentially drone saturation to complicate defensive calculations. Drone swarms can serve as decoys. They force defenders to expend interceptors or reveal radar signatures. However, carrier strike groups train extensively for such scenarios. Modern naval doctrine emphasizes layered defense, redundancy, and rapid threat assessment. Another important element is intelligence. Before any missile launch, there would likely be indicators: missile fueling activity, movement of launch vehicles, communications traffic. These indicators would be monitored. That does not eliminate risk, but it reduces the element of surprise. Now, let's address public information challenges. In modern conflicts, information moves faster than verification. Social media clips appear within minutes. Claims spread globally before official statements are released. It is critical to distinguish between verified impact footage and recycled or misattributed videos. Historically, numerous conflicts have seen old explosion footage recirculated with new captions. That is why independent confirmation matters. As of now, no confirmed visual evidence shows the USS Abraham Lincoln being struck. That does not mean nothing happened. It means conclusions must be based on verified reporting. Now let's discuss strategic implications, even if the strike was unsuccessful. An attempted missile strike on a U.S. carrier represents a threshold crossing. It expands the target set. It increases unpredictability. Carrier strike groups are not passive defensive formations. They carry offensive strike capability. If leadership determined that a red line had been crossed, response options would include airstrikes on launch sites, command nodes, or missile infrastructure. However, escalation control is central to modern military planning. Both sides may seek to demonstrate resolve without triggering full-scale war. There is also the regional dimension. Neighboring states monitor these developments closely. Maritime shipping routes are vital for global energy markets. Any perception that the region is entering direct US-Iran naval confrontation can affect oil prices, shipping insurance rates, and economic stability. Therefore, even an attempted strike has ripple effects beyond the battlefield. Let's also examine Iran's military doctrine. Iran does not aim to defeat the US Navy in conventional naval battle. Instead, it aims to raise the cost of intervention. By threatening high-value assets like aircraft carriers, it attempts to create deterrence through risk. This is often referred to as asymmetric deterrence. If US leadership perceives that carriers are at elevated risk, they may adjust positioning, increase defensive posture, or operate at greater distance. That said, carriers are designed to operate in contested environments. They are not invulnerable, but they are among the most protected military assets on Earth. Another factor is missile inventory. Ballistic missiles are finite resources. Launching them is a serious decision. It signals commitment. It also exposes launch sites to counterstrike. If Iran launched missiles toward a carrier group, it likely accepted the risk of retaliatory targeting. This brings us to escalation ladders. Conflicts often evolve through incremental steps: airstrikes on fixed sites, missile retaliation, naval signaling, cyber operations. Targeting an aircraft carrier moves the conflict into a higher tier. However, without confirmed impact, this event may remain in the realm of signaling rather than structural escalation. Now let's talk about survivability. Nimitz-class carriers are built with compartmentalization, damage control systems, and redundancy. Even in worst-case scenarios, they are designed to remain operational after sustaining damage. But again, There is no evidence of damage at this time. Operational secrecy also plays a role. The US military does not immediately disclose detailed positioning or defensive engagements. That information can remain classified. So absence of detail is not necessarily absence of action, but speculation must remain grounded. Let's shift to what happens next. There are several possible paths forward. 1. Tensions stabilize. Iran frames the launch as retaliation. The United States avoids public escalation. The situation returns to indirect confrontation. 2. Further missile attempts occur, raising risk of miscalculation. 3. A broader maritime confrontation develops, drawing in additional regional actors. Much depends on political decision-making, not just military capability. We also must consider that warfare today extends beyond kinetic strikes. Cyber operations could accompany missile launches. Electronic warfare efforts could attempt to disrupt radar systems or communications. However, carrier strike groups are hardened against such attempts. In summary, here is what we know. Iran claims to have targeted the USS Abraham Lincoln. There is no confirmed evidence of a successful strike. Aircraft carriers operate with layered, sophisticated defenses. Striking a moving carrier is significantly more complex than striking fixed targets. Even an attempted strike represents a major escalation signal. And finally, escalation management will determine whether this remains contained or expands. This is a high-stakes moment, but it is also a moment where precision of language matters. Until verified evidence emerges, the responsible conclusion is that Iran attempted to signal strength, and the United States continues operating its naval assets in the region. We will continue monitoring confirmed statements, satellite imagery analysis, and official briefings. The situation remains fluid, and in modern conflict, the difference between a headline and a verified event can define the trajectory of war. Stay tuned for further updates as more authenticated information becomes available.